She thought this was the happiest day of her life. The flowers were perfect. The vows were ready. The love of her life stood waiting at the altar. But then his mother stood up. The child she's carrying belongs to another man. The whispers came first, then the gasps, and then the doubt in Daniel's eyes, the hesitation that cut deeper than any betrayal. Emily ran. But what she didn't know was that this was never about her. It was never about an affair, a scandal, or even the baby growing inside her. This was about a much bigger secret. A secret Sylvia had spent decades hiding. And now it was all about to come crashing down. The Carter estate had never looked more breathtaking. Emily Whitmore and Daniel Carter would exchange vows. People whispered about the couple with admiration, some with envy. "Have you seen Emily's dress?" a woman murmured, her eyes scanning the bridal suite windows. "They say it was custom made in Paris." "I heard Daniel proposed on a yacht in Santorini," another guest added, swirling her drink. "A private dinner under the stars. Can you imagine?" An older gentleman chuckled, adjusting his cufflinks. "That boy is Richard Carter's son, all right. Knows how to put on a show." The conversations blended into the warm hum of the afternoon, all of it wrapped in an air of effortless perfection. But beneath the polished smiles and sparkling decor, tension brewed in quiet corners. Sylvia Carter, the mother of the groom, stood near the entrance, her expression unreadable. Dressed in a deep emerald gown that hugged her slender frame, she watched the guests like a queen surveying her kingdom. She smiled at all the right people, accepted compliments with graceful nods, but her eyes flickered, searching, calculating. Meanwhile, inside the estate, in an elegant suite bathed in golden light, Emily Whitmore stood before a full-length mirror. Her wedding gown, a delicate blend of lace and silk, hugged her frame like it had been woven just for her. "Breathe," Claire whispered, stepping behind her. "You look perfect." She swallowed hard, glancing at Claire through the mirror. "Is it weird that I feel like I might throw up?" Claire, perched on the edge of the velvet couch, raised an eyebrow. "It's only weird if you actually throw up on that dress. If you do, I'm out. Not dealing with that." Emily let out a breathy laugh, shaking her head. "You're so comforting. That's why I'm here." Claire stood, moving behind Emily and adjusting the back of the dress unnecessarily. "You're just nervous. It's normal. It's a big day. Everyone's staring at you, expecting you to be flawless. No pressure or anything." Emily groaned. "That is not helping." Claire smirked. Okay, real talk. You love Daniel, right?" Emily blinked at her reflection, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Yeah, more than anything." "Then that's all that matters," Claire said simply. Emily nodded, but the uneasy feeling in her stomach didn't quite disappear. It wasn't the kind of nervousness that came from getting married. It was something else, something lingering just beneath the surface, whispering to her that something wasn't quite right. A soft knock at the door made them both turn. Her father, Thomas Whitmore, stepped inside, his usually sharp expression softening the moment he saw her. His blue eyes flickered with something between pride and nostalgia as he took in the sight of his daughter, standing there in a wedding dress, looking every bit like the woman her mother had been. "Wow," he said, exhaling as if he had been holding his breath. "You look just like her." Emily smiled, blinking back the sudden sting of tears. "I was just telling Claire the same thing." Thomas stepped closer, adjusting the sleeve of his suit jacket, as if trying to keep himself busy. "I know I'm supposed to say something wise right now, something meaningful, but all I can think about is the little girl who used to run around the house in a tutu and rain boots, swearing she'd never get married." Emily let out a soft laugh. That was a solid phase. "It lasted 5 years, Thomas reminded her, shaking his head. Claire grinned. "I need to see pictures of this." Thomas smirked but kept his eyes on Emily. "You sure about this?" The question was simple, but Emily felt the weight behind it. She took a breath, pushing past the nagging unease. "Yeah, I am." Her father studied her for a moment before nodding. "Then let's get you married." Meanwhile, across the estate, Daniel Carter stood in front of his own mirror, adjusting his tie for what had to be the 10th time. His reflection stared back at him, sharp jaw, neatly styled dark hair, and eyes that couldn't quite hide the nervous energy buzzing beneath the surface. "You know, if you adjust that tie one more time, I'm going to have to confiscate it," Liam said, amusement lacing his voice. Daniel exhaled sharply, dropping his hands. "I just want to see her already. Emily, his Emily, the woman who walked into his life and set his whole world on fire. She's going to be the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," Daniel says, his voice thick with emotion. Liam claps a hand on his shoulder. "You've got it bad, man." Daniel doesn't deny it. He's madly in love. The very thought of Emily, of their future together, makes his chest tighten with something indescribable. They have spent years building this moment. Every date, every stolen kiss, every whispered promise leading to today. He had dreamed of this day since the moment he first laid eyes on her, and now it was finally here. A knock at the door pulls him from his thoughts. His father, Richard Carter, steps in, dressed in a tailored tuxedo. There is a proud glint in his eyes as he walks up to his son. "You ready?" Richard asks, his deep voice filled with warmth. Daniel nods. He has never been more certain of anything in his life, but amidst the pure, unfiltered joy, there is one person who does not share in the excitement. Sylvia Carter, the mother of the groom, sits at a table near the grand entrance, her fingers tightening around the stem of her untouched wine glass. Her posture is graceful, composed, but her knuckles are white. She forces a smile when someone greets her, but there is a storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. Her eyes scan the room, lingering on Emily's family, then on Daniel himself, her son, or at least, the man she had raised as her son. She swallows the lump in her throat, her secret pressing against her ribcage like a ticking time bomb. Daniel is not Richard's son. She had spent years burying that truth, ensuring that it never surfaced, pretending that her fleeting indiscretion with another man hadn't resulted in a child. But the world has a cruel sense of irony, because now, just when she thought she had everything under control, Emily was pregnant. The grand doors swing open, and all heads turn. Emily steps inside. A collective gasp fills the room. She is a vision, the very embodiment of love, of happiness, of everything Daniel has ever wanted. His eyes lock onto hers, his heart pounding in his chest. She smiles at him, and in that moment, the whole world disappears. Daniel thinks this is the happiest moment of his life. He doesn't know it's about to become the worst. Sylvia Carter had always prided herself on being observant. It was one of the many things that had allowed her to survive in the world of wealth and power, knowing when to speak, when to stay silent, and most importantly, when to pay attention. And right now, all of her attention was on Emily Whitmore. It had started with little things that most people wouldn't even notice, but Sylvia did. She first caught it at the Whitmore Carter family dinner, 2 weeks before the wedding. A private, intimate affair, just close family, expensive wine, and conversation that carefully avoided any real depth. Sylvia had sat across from Emily, watching as the young woman politely engaged in conversation, her laughter soft, her eyes bright. To anyone else she looked perfectly fine, but something was off. Emily's fingers curled around the stem of her wine glass, but she didn't take a sip. She barely even glanced at it. Instead, she reached for her water, sipping carefully before setting it down. Interesting. Sylvia took another delicate sip of her own wine, her gaze flickering down to the untouched cup of coffee next to Emily's plate. Richard had ordered it for her earlier, and Emily had smiled, thanking him, but she hadn't touched it. Sylvia tilted her head slightly. Emily loved coffee. She had heard Daniel mention it countless times, how she couldn't start her mornings without it, how she had a very specific way of making it. But tonight, she hadn't even acknowledged it. Subtle, very subtle, but Sylvia noticed. Then there was the way Emily's hand had drifted toward her stomach, not dramatically, not in an obvious way, but there, a small, almost subconscious movement, a light press against her midsection, a brief furrow of her brows before she quickly lowered her hand, like she hadn't even realized she'd done it. Sylvia's lips curled into a small, unreadable smile. The next moment of confirmation came the following week. It was during the final wedding preparations at the estate. The caterers had brought a selection of dishes for Emily and Daniel to taste. Delicacies flown in from France, hand-selected wines, a meticulously curated menu that only the elite could afford. Emily had seemed excited at first, but the moment the plates were placed in front of her, something in her expression shifted. Daniel hadn't noticed, too busy raving about the steak in front of him, but Sylvia saw everything. Emily had taken one bite of the creamy truffle risotto before her entire posture changed. She swallowed carefully, then set her fork down. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Daniel asked, wiping his mouth with a napkin. Emily blinked, forcing a smile. "Yeah, of course. She hesitated. "I think I might be coming down with something. I've been feeling a little off lately." Sylvia's grip on her napkin tightened. Off. She wasn't just avoiding coffee. She wasn't just subconsciously holding her stomach. Now she was nauseous. Emily pushed her plate slightly away, discreet but noticeable. That was it. That was the confirmation Sylvia needed. The pieces clicked into place so perfectly it was almost laughable. Emily was pregnant, and she didn't even know it yet. Sylvia barely touched her wine for the rest of the night. Her mind was spinning. Emily was pregnant. But was it Daniel's child? It should be. It had to be. But was it? The doubt crept into her mind like a poison, spreading through her veins. The wedding was still a week away. How far along was she? Was it a mistake? A drunken night? Or had there been someone else? The thought made Sylvia's stomach turn. But even worse than the question of the baby's father was the cold realization of what this could mean for her. Because Sylvia wasn't just worried about Emily's secret, she was worried about her own. If this pregnancy led to a paternity test down the line, if Daniel ever had any reason to question genetics, it could unravel everything. Because Daniel was not Richard Carter's son. And if Daniel wasn't Richard's biological son, that meant the entire Carter lineage, the wealth, the name, the legacy, was built on a lie. If a paternity test ever happened, it wouldn't just be Emily's world crashing down, it would be Sylvia's. Sylvia sat in her bedroom that night, staring into the darkness, her mind a battlefield of panic and calculation. She had to stop this. She had to prevent the wedding. She needed to turn the suspicion onto Emily before anyone could ever question Daniel. And so, a plan formed in her mind. A cruel, calculated plan. It didn't take long to find the right person for the job. Money could buy silence, loyalty, and most importantly, a believable lie. Her driver had mentioned a hotel downtown, a luxury spot frequented by politicians, executives, and people who needed discretion. Sylvia arranged for a meeting. The man who met her was in his early 50s with graying hair and a tired face, the kind of man who had worked in service long enough to understand how power worked. He smelled faintly of cheap aftershave and desperation. He was perfect. They sat in a quiet corner of a high-end restaurant, a place where people wouldn't dare stare too long at Sylvia Carter. She sipped her wine slowly, watching the man across from her as he shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "You worked at the Kingman Hotel," she said smoothly, setting her glass down. He cleared his throat. Yeah, for about 12 years. 12 years, she repeated, tapping her nails against the table. "That's a long time. You must have seen quite a bit." The man swallowed. "Ma'am, if this is about..." She slid an envelope across the table. It was thick, filled with more cash than he had probably seen in a year. His eyes flickered down to it, then back up to her. "I need you to say something," Sylvia continued, her voice cool, unwavering. "Something that will be very easy for you. You saw a woman at the Kingman Hotel. She checked in late at night with a man. They looked intimate, familiar. When you saw her, she seemed nervous, like she didn't want to be noticed." The man's throat bobbed. "Ma'am, I can't say something that isn't true." Sylvia leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. Her smile was sharp, calculated. "Can't?" she echoed, tilting her head. The man hesitated. She reached into her bag and pulled out a second envelope, sliding it toward him with practiced ease. "5,000 now," she said. "5,000 after the job is done." His fingers twitched, but he didn't touch it yet. "I don't need you to create a scandal," she said, voice patient. "I don't need you to say anything extreme, just that you saw her, that she was there, that she was with someone. That's all." The man exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. "And what happens if someone asks for proof? Cameras? Records?" Sylvia took another sip of wine, completely unbothered. "Hotels erase footage every 72 hours. And reservations?" She let out a soft chuckle. "Well, sometimes names can be changed, can't they?" She reached into her bag again and pulled out a printed hotel reservation, Emily Whitmore's name on it, right there, clear as day. The man's eyes widened. "Where did you—" "That's not your concern," Sylvia interrupted smoothly, sliding the paper toward him. "What is your concern is that on the day of my son's wedding, you will show up, and when I give you the signal, you will speak. You will say exactly what we discussed, and you will make it sound convincing. Hesitate, and..." She tapped the second envelope lightly. "This disappears." The man's hand finally moved, hesitantly pulling the envelope toward him. His fingers gripped the edges, knuckles white. Sylvia smiled. "Good." She picked up her wine glass, swirling the liquid inside before taking one last sip. "Enjoy your evening, Mr. Calloway," she murmured, standing gracefully. "I'll see you at the wedding." She turned and walked away, not bothering to look back. It had been a summer drenched in loneliness. The year was before Daniel was born, and Sylvia's marriage was hanging by a thread. Richard Carter, a man of wealth and status, had grown increasingly distant, his attention split between his business empire and the beautiful young assistant who followed him everywhere. Sylvia knew about the affair. Everyone in their social circle whispered about it behind manicured hands at charity galas and dinner parties. But in those circles, women didn't leave their husbands. They suffered in silence, wearing their betrayal like a badge of honor, so long as the wealth and prestige remained intact. And so she stayed, but resentment festered like an open wound. Then she met him. His name was Nathan Hale, and he was everything Richard wasn't. A charming, ruggedly handsome man with laugh lines and a devil-may-care attitude, Nathan was a renowned architect, invited to a charity event to discuss a new project for a children's hospital. Sylvia still remembered that night vividly. The air had been thick with the scent of roses and champagne, the string quartet playing a hauntingly beautiful melody. Nathan had caught her eyes across the ballroom, his gaze undeniably intrigued. He wasn't part of their usual crowd. He didn't care for the politics of high society. That, in itself, was thrilling. For the first time in years, Sylvia felt seen. And so, as the night stretched on, she let herself be reckless. She laughed too loudly at his jokes, accepted an extra glass of wine when he offered, let her fingers linger on his arm longer than necessary. One moment, they were at a crowded gala, exchanging flirtatious smiles. The next, she was pressed against the cool stone wall of a balcony, the city lights glowing behind them, as Nathan's lips claimed hers. For the first time in so long, she didn't feel like the abandoned wife of Richard Carter. She felt desirable. And then, she made a terrible mistake. It had started as a single night of passion, a desperate act of defiance against her husband's cold neglect. But it didn't end there. One night turned into a string of stolen moments, secret meetings at secluded hotels, hushed conversations in dimly lit restaurants, long drives where they could pretend, for a few hours, that the rest of the world didn't exist. With Nathan, Sylvia felt alive. She felt wanted. And for a while she let herself believe it wouldn't matter, that no one would ever know, until she missed her period. Panic set in quickly. She counted the weeks over and over again, her heart hammering as she realized the truth. The baby wasn't Richard's. Sylvia had never felt fear like that before, a primal, suffocating fear that kept her up at night, twisting her stomach into knots. If Richard found out, if anyone found out, her entire life would be over. Her marriage, her status, everything. She couldn't let that happen. And so, she made a cold, calculated decision. She would lie. She would let Richard believe the child was his. And to do that, she had to bury every trace of her affair, covering her tracks. Sylvia acted quickly and ruthlessly. First, she ended things with Nathan. One evening, she met him at their usual spot, a private suite at the Fairmont Hotel. She walked in, her heart pounding, and without meeting his eyes, she said the words she knew would destroy him. This was a mistake. Nathan had frowned, confusion flashing in his eyes. "Sylvia, what are you talking about?" She forced herself to be cruel. "This was never real. I don't love you." She could see the moment his heart broke. He stepped toward her, his voice laced with disbelief. "Sylvia, you don't mean that." But she did. She had to. If she showed even a hint of weakness, she knew she wouldn't be able to walk away. So she looked him in the eyes and lied. "This is over, Nathan. It was just an affair. That's all." He stared at her for a long time, his jaw tightening, his hands clenched into fists. "You don't love him?" "No," she admitted, "but I love this life." And that had been the end of it. Or at least, she thought it was. With Nathan gone, she turned her attention to Richard. She knew she had to sell the illusion perfectly, so she seduced her husband, ensuring there was just enough overlap in the timeline to make it plausible that the baby was his. When she told Richard she was pregnant, he had been thrilled, and just like that, her secret was safe. The first time she held Daniel in her arms, he was tiny, fragile, perfect. Her heart had clenched as she looked at him, at the little boy who had Nathan's eyes. She had expected to feel triumph, relief that she had convinced Richard that Daniel was his, but all she felt was guilt. She knew she had made her choice. She had chosen power, security, her place in high society. But looking at Daniel, she couldn't ignore the truth. She had stolen something from him. He would never know his real father. The door to the hospital room had opened, and Richard had walked in, beaming, looking down at the child he believed was his. He had bent down, pressing a kiss to Daniel's forehead. "My son," he had whispered, "you're going to be great, just like your father." Sylvia had forced a smile, her stomach twisting. And then Nathan had appeared. He had come. Standing at the edge of the room, he had looked at her, his expression unreadable. He hadn't tried to take Daniel. He hadn't made a scene. He had just stood there, watching. For one horrifying second, she thought he might tell the truth, but he didn't. He had just looked at her, looked at the life she had chosen, and then he turned and left, and that was the last time she ever saw him. To the world, Sylvia had always been the epitome of poise and elegance, the devoted wife of a powerful man, the mother of a son destined to inherit a fortune. But behind the carefully crafted illusion of perfection, she had spent every day living in fear. Fear that one misstep, one slip, one DNA test would bring it all crashing down. And now, that moment of reckoning was dangerously close. All because of Emily's pregnancy. Sylvia couldn't let that happen. She wouldn't. She had to act first. Emily had to be the one disgraced. Emily had to be the one exposed. Because if the world was looking at Emily's betrayal, they wouldn't see Sylvia's. A soft melody floated through the air, the delicate sound of a violin filling the grand garden. Emily Whitmore stood at the entrance, framed by the soft light of the setting sun. A collective gasp spreads through the room as she steps forward, her ivory gown shimmering in the soft light. The delicate lace of her veil flows behind her like a whisper of dreams. Her hands clutch a bouquet of white roses, but her gaze, her entire world, is focused ahead, on Daniel. Her groom stands at the altar, his breath catching in his throat as he drinks in the sight of her. He had always known she was beautiful, but today, she is otherworldly. Daniel's heart pounded as he watched Emily approach, his breath catching in his throat. He had seen her in 1,000 different ways, laughing in the morning light, wrapped in his sweatshirt on lazy Sundays, teasing him over burnt toast, but nothing compared to this moment, where she looked like she had stepped right out of his dreams. Liam, standing beside him, leaned in slightly. "If you don't blink soon, you might pass out." Daniel barely heard him. Emily's father, Thomas, walked beside her, his hand firm around hers, as if he was still trying to hold on to his little girl for just one more second. "You ready?" he whispered. Emily swallowed, nodding. "Yeah." He patted her hand before gently placing it into Daniel's, his sharp blue eyes silently telling him everything that words never could. "Take care of her." Daniel nodded. "Always." Emily felt warmth spread through her as Daniel's fingers curled around hers, grounding her, steadying her. She smiled up at him, a little breathless. "Hey." Daniel exhaled a laugh, shaking his head. "Hey yourself." The guest settled as the officiant stepped forward, opening the leather-bound book in his hands. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice strong and steady. "We are gathered here today to celebrate the union of Emily Whitmore and Daniel Carter." Emily barely heard the words, lost in the way Daniel's thumb brushed against the back of her hand. Daniel only saw her, glowing in the soft light, a future unfolding before his eyes. The officiant smiled as he looked between them. "Before we continue, if anyone here has a reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now, or forever hold your peace." Silence, and then movement. From the corner of the garden, Sylvia Carter stood slowly, deliberately, the rustling of her gown almost deafening in the stillness. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Heads turned. Emily's grip on Daniel's hand tightened. Daniel blinked, his chest constricting. "Mom?" Sylvia said nothing. Not yet. She just stood there, her expression unreadable, her hands clasped in front of her, as if she were some grieving mother about to deliver tragic news. The officiant hesitated. "Mrs. Carter." Sylvia exhaled a careful, pained sigh, and then, finally, she spoke. "I wasn't going to say anything." She turned her eyes to Daniel, her carefully crafted sorrow evident in every inch of her face. "But I can't stay silent anymore." Emily's heart slammed against her ribs. "Daniel, I love you. You know I do. And I wanted nothing more than to welcome Emily into this family, to watch you build a future together." She swallowed hard, looking away as if struggling to find the right words. Then, she met his eyes. "But she hasn't been honest with you." Emily's stomach dropped. The guests began to murmur. Daniel's grip on Emily's hand loosened. "What?" Emily shook her head, eyes flashing with panic. "What are you talking about?" Sylvia didn't even look at her. Instead, she turned to Daniel, her voice breaking like a mother devastated by betrayal. "She's pregnant." Emily felt the air leave her lungs. Daniel froze. The murmur of the crowd turned into a ripple of shock. Sylvia took a slow, measured step forward. "I wanted to believe it was yours. I truly did," she whispered. "But it's not." Emily's head snapped toward Daniel. "That's not true." Her voice cracked. "Daniel, I swear, Sylvia's voice cut through hers, soft yet sharp. "Ask her yourself," she murmured. "Ask her why she never told you. Ask her why she's been hiding it." Emily's entire body felt like it was burning. Daniel turned to her, his expression frozen in a mix of confusion and something that looked dangerously close to doubt. "Emily?" She shook her head violently. "This isn't happening." And then, from the back of the crowd, another voice. A man stepped forward. He was older, dressed in a simple suit, his face twisted in what appeared to be conflicted remorse. His voice wavered, just enough to make it seem real. "I work at the Kingman Hotel," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "And 2 weeks ago I saw this woman, Emily Whitmore, checking into a room with another man." The reaction was instant. Gasps, whispers. Emily's heart stopped. Daniel's body went rigid beside her, his hand slipping slightly from hers. The man hesitated for dramatic effect, glancing at Sylvia, as if seeking permission to continue. "She begged me not to say anything because she was engaged," he added, voice full of false guilt. "I wasn't going to say anything, but I couldn't watch this wedding happen without telling the truth." Emily couldn't breathe. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Daniel turned to her, his jaw clenched. "Emily?" She whipped her head toward the man. "That's a lie." Her voice cracked, but the damage was already done. The whispers grew louder. "Did she really?" "I knew it. She always seemed too perfect." Poor Daniel. Emily felt her entire world shattering around her. "Daniel, I swear, I don't even know who that man is," she pleaded, gripping his arm. I've never been to that hotel. I would never. Daniel took a slow step back. I don't. The man reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a folded slip of paper, a receipt. I know it's hard to believe, the man continued, voice solemn, but this is the proof. He held it up. Emily's breath hitched. Daniel took the paper, his fingers trembling as he unfolded it. His eyes scanned the words. Kingman Hotel, Executive Suite, booked under Emily Whitmore's name. Emily stared in horror. That's not mine, she whispered. I never booked a hotel room. Sylvia pressed a hand over her mouth, as if she were barely holding back tears. Oh, Emily, she murmured, shaking her head, her voice filled with manufactured disappointment. I trusted you. Emily spun toward her. You did this. Sylvia placed a delicate hand on her chest, feigning hurt. Emily, do you really think I would create something so terrible that I would want my own son to be heartbroken on his wedding day? Emily could barely process the moment. She looked back at Daniel, but he was already trapped in the web Sylvia had spun. He was looking at her, but he wasn't seeing her anymore. He was seeing the headlines, the scandal, the doubt. His faith in her, their love was crumbling. The silence was unbearable. Emily felt like she couldn't breathe, like the walls of the Grand Carter estate were closing in around her. The whispers of the guests blurred into an indistinct hum, their eyes piercing into her like daggers, judging, questioning, doubting. The receipt was still in Daniel's hands, his fingers gripping the thin paper so tightly that it crumpled. His expression was unreadable, frozen between disbelief and devastation. Emily's hands trembled. She reached for him, her voice cracking. Daniel, please, look at me. He did, finally, his dark eyes locking onto hers. But they weren't the same eyes that had looked at her just moments ago, filled with love and certainty. They were clouded now, filled with something she couldn't bear to name. Say something, she begged, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. His jaw clenched and unclenched, as if he were battling something inside himself. Finally, he spoke. I don't know what to think, he said. The words hit her harder than a slap. She shook her head, tears blurring her vision. You don't know what to think? She repeated, her voice trembling. After everything? After all the years we've been together? After everything we've been through? You don't know what to think? Daniel flinched, guilt flashing across his face, but he didn't take it back. A choked sound escaped Emily's throat. She turned wildly, looking at the guests, at the faces staring back at her. No one was defending her. No one was speaking up. She turned to Sylvia, and that was when she saw it. The faintest smirk, small, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. A cold realization settled over her. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't some unfortunate misunderstanding. This was planned. Sylvia had done this. She had taken the happiest day of Emily's life and set it on fire. Emily's breath hitched, and she turned back to Daniel. One last time, one last desperate chance for him to fight for her. Daniel, tell me you don't believe this, she whispered. Please. Daniel swallowed hard. He exhaled, voice thick with uncertainty. I just don't know, Emily. And that was it. Emily felt her heart shatter. Tears burned down her cheeks as she took a slow step back, then another. And then, before she could stop herself, she turned and ran. Her bouquet slipped from her fingers, hitting the floor with a soft, hollow thud. Gasps followed her as she pushed past guests, her gown catching against chairs and tablecloths as she fled the nightmare her wedding had become. The golden afternoon light blurred into streaks of white as she ran down the aisle, the world spinning, her breath coming in ragged, uneven gasps. She had to get out. She couldn't breathe. Behind her, Daniel stood frozen, lost, stunned. The woman he was supposed to marry had just run out of their wedding in tears, and he had done nothing to stop her. His hands curled into fists, his heart hammering in his chest, but he couldn't move. Liam stepped closer, his jaw tight. Daniel! But before Daniel could respond, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. Unbelievable. Daniel barely had time to turn before a fist slammed into his jaw. The impact sent him stumbling backward, his ears ringing. He tasted blood. Dad! Emily's father, Thomas Whitmore, stood there, his face twisted in rage. His hand was still clenched, still ready to strike again. The crowd gasped in shock. You spineless bastard, Thomas seethed, his voice low but shaking with fury. You let her walk away. You let this happen. Daniel wiped his lips, still dazed. Mr. Whitmore, Thomas grabbed the front of his tuxedo, pulling him in close. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You should have defended her. Daniel's breath caught. She looked you in the eyes and begged you to believe her, Thomas continued. And you hesitated. You let her break. Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came. Thomas stared at him for a long moment, then shoved him away. I trusted you with my daughter, he said, his voice full of disgust. I was wrong. And then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Daniel stood there, his body numb, his mind spiraling. Sylvia, still poised in the corner, took a delicate sip of champagne, her smirk barely concealed behind the rim of her glass. Her plan had worked. Emily was gone, and Daniel, he was exactly where she wanted him. Alone, confused, and vulnerable. The room was quiet, except for the faint ticking of the clock on the nightstand. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers gripping the small white box in her lap. The words on it blurred together. She forced herself to turn it over. 2 lines. Her breath caught in her throat. She was pregnant. Claire took a cautious step forward. "You okay?" Her voice was softer than usual, careful in a way that made Emily realize how long she'd been silent. Emily lifted her head, her gaze meeting Claire's in the mirror. Slowly, she exhaled, her fingers tightening against the sink's edge. Her voice came out flat, emotionless. "Sylvia knew before I did." The second she said it out loud, something shifted. Claire stayed quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, she did." Emily swallowed, closing her eyes for a second. The clock on Claire's phone read 1:37 a.m., but she didn't care. Sleep wasn't an option tonight, not after what had just happened. Not after Emily had taken that test, looked her in the eye, and said the words that sent a shiver down her spine. She stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. The ringing felt endless, but finally a voice came through, groggy, irritated. "Someone better be dead." "Liam, shut up and listen." There was a pause, then a sigh. "That bad?" "Emily's pregnant." Silence. She waited, expecting him to say something, to crack a joke, to react in some way that made this feel less suffocating. But he didn't. His silence was heavier than she expected. Then his tone shifted. Low, serious. And Sylvia knew before Emily even took the test. Claire's stomach twisted. "Yes." Another pause. Then Liam exhaled, voice sharp now, like something inside him had clicked into place. "That means she was watching her before the wedding." Claire swallowed hard. "That means she planned this whole thing," Liam continued, voice cold now. "Down to the fake hotel receipt, down to every single damn detail." Claire didn't respond. She didn't need to. They both knew the truth now. The next morning, Claire didn't waste time. She found the proof. Real proof. She marched into the cafe where Liam was waiting, dropped a folded paper onto the table, and crossed her arms. "Here." Liam raised an eyebrow before picking it up. His eyes scanned the page, his jaw tightening with every second that passed. A receipt, dated 2 weeks before the wedding, stamped at a boutique across town, the exact same time Sylvia claimed Emily had been in a hotel room with another man. Liam exhaled sharply through his nose, shaking his head. Sylvia didn't just set her up. He looked up at Claire, his expression dark. She controlled every single detail. Claire sat down across from him, gripping her coffee cup so tightly her knuckles went white. "Yeah," she said quietly, "and now we're gonna blow it all apart." Liam tapped his fingers against the receipt, thinking. Then suddenly, he stood up. "I'm gonna find that hotel worker." Claire blinked. "What, right now?" Liam grabbed his jacket, already heading for the door. "You think I'm waiting?" Liam wasn't the kind of guy who liked waiting. He didn't like sitting still, didn't like playing the long game. But this required patience. Tracking down a man who didn't want to be found wasn't as easy as making a few calls. It had taken him the better part of the day, but eventually, he got a name. Jordan Lasky, former concierge at the Royal Inn. A guy with a habit of taking cash under the table, who had conveniently disappeared the second rumors started flying about Emily's so-called affair. Liam found him holed up in a dingy motel 2 towns over, looking like a man who had just barely escaped trouble, but wasn't smart enough to stay away from it. Now, sitting across from him at a scratched-up table in the back of a quiet diner, Liam watched Jordan fidget. His fingers drummed anxiously against the table, his knee bouncing beneath it. He wouldn't even meet Liam's gaze. "You look nervous," Liam said, his voice low, unreadable. Jordan swallowed, forcing out a weak laugh. "Should I be?" Liam leaned in slightly, his expression unreadable. "That depends." Jordan's fingers stilled. Liam sighed, sitting back. "Look, man, I don't have time for games. We both know why I'm here." Jordan licked his lips, still avoiding eye contact. "I don't—" "Cut the crap!" Liam's tone hardened. "You lied. We have proof. Now you're gonna tell me the truth." Jordan swallowed hard. His eyes darted around the room like he was looking for an escape. Liam sat forward again, voice dropping even lower. "Or I make sure every damn person in this city knows exactly what you did." That did it. Jordan exhaled shakily, running a hand through his thinning hair. I didn't have a choice," he muttered. Liam arched a brow. "Didn't have a choice? Or didn't care as long as the money was good?" Jordan hesitated, then slumped in defeat. Liam reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone and dialed Daniel. The line rang twice before a clipped, irritated voice answered. "What?" "Meet me at the Royal Inn," Liam said, his voice calm but firm. You need to hear this yourself." Daniel sighed. "Liam, I swear to God, it's about your mother." Silence. Then finally a sharp inhale. "I'm on my way." 15 minutes later, Daniel stepped into the diner, looking as put together as always, except for the barely concealed tension in his jaw, the way his eyes darted around like he was already bracing for a fight. Jordan looked up and went pale. Daniel slid into the seat across from him, barely glancing at Liam. "Talk." Liam didn't say anything. He just sat back and gestured to Jordan. The man swallowed hard, his hands gripping the edge of the table. He hesitated for half a second, but the weight of Daniel's stare was suffocating. I never saw her," Jordan confessed, his voice small. Daniel's expression didn't change. "Excuse me?" Jordan's breath came quicker now. "Emily Whitmore. She was never at the hotel. I made the whole thing up." Daniel's jaw tensed. "The receipt?" Jordan nodded quickly, almost desperately. "Fake. I was following orders." Daniel's entire body locked up. Liam studied him closely, waiting for the moment it hit. Daniel exhaled through his nose, his voice controlled, but ice cold. "Who gave you the orders?" Jordan hesitated. Daniel's patience snapped. "Who?" Jordan swallowed. His voice barely made it past his lips. "Sylvia Carter." For a few unbearable seconds, the world just stopped. Then finally, Daniel sat back, slowly, like his body was moving through water. His face was unreadable, but Liam could see it. The moment the last piece of his mother's lie shattered. "I see." His voice was quiet, flat. Jordan flinched. I'm sorry, man, Daniel stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "I don't care." Jordan clamped his mouth shut. Daniel turned to Liam, his voice still eerily calm. "We're done here." Liam studied him carefully. Daniel looked fine on the surface, but Liam knew better. He had just lost the last piece of faith he had in his mother. Daniel clenched his jaw, inhaled slowly, then muttered, "I need to go." He didn't wait for a response. He just walked out. Liam watched him go, exhaling heavily. He looked back at Jordan, shaking his head. "You better hope I don't see you again." Jordan didn't say a word. Liam stood, dropped a few bills on the table, and walked out. The Carter estate was silent at this hour. Daniel had spent the last 2 nights tossing and turning, his mind tangled with thoughts he couldn't escape. The conversation at the diner, the way that man had stammered, how he had admitted it had all been a lie, that his mother had orchestrated everything, was still ringing in his ears. He had gone home that night, fully intending to confront her, but something had stopped him, something in his gut. So instead he waited, he watched, and that's when he started noticing it. Sylvia wasn't acting like herself. She was always poised, in control, untouchable. But now she was distracted, unfocused, snapping at staff for no reason, avoiding Richard, and she was drinking more. That was the biggest tell. Sylvia Carter never drank more than a polite glass of wine at dinner. Always measured, always careful. But over the past few days, he had noticed something different. The scent of whiskey lingered in the study. Her glass was fuller than usual. Her hands weren't as steady. Tonight, when sleep refused to come, Daniel found himself wandering downstairs, maybe out of restlessness, maybe because something told him that if he stayed in bed, he would miss something. That's when he saw it. A dim light coming from the study. Daniel slowed his steps, moving quietly, his pulse kicking up for no reason other than instinct. The door was slightly ajar, just enough for him to see inside without being seen. Sylvia sat at her desk, a glass of amber liquid in one hand, the other gripping a set of letters. Daniel frowned. She wasn't reading them. Not really. She was staring, her lips moving slightly, whispering words too soft for him to hear. Daniel strained to catch her words, but only fragments reached him. "It's always been for you." His brow furrowed. "No one will ever know." His chest tightened. "It was the only way." Sylvia exhaled sharply, suddenly moving, gathering the letters quickly, almost frantically. Daniel's body went rigid. She was hiding something, and whatever it was, she had no intention of letting anyone find it. Daniel stayed in the shadows, watching as Sylvia moved through the dimly lit hallway. Her footsteps were light, practiced, but there was a tension in the way she carried herself, a stiffness, a purpose. She clutched the letters to her chest like they were keeping her alive, like the weight of them was somehow heavier than paper should be. She never once looked back. Daniel followed at a safe distance, his own heartbeat pulsing in his ears. She wasn't going to her bedroom, not to the study, not anywhere she normally went. She was heading toward the older wing of the house. That part of the estate had been unused for years. The last renovation had sealed most of it off, leaving only storage and rooms no one cared to enter anymore. Sylvia stopped in front of one of the doors. It was ordinary, unremarkable, just another storage room, as far as anyone else was concerned. But the way she hesitated, the way she scanned the hallway before slipping a key from her robe pocket, This was no ordinary storage room to her. Daniel's hands curled into fists as he watched her unlock the door and step inside. The seconds stretched unbearably long. Then she emerged, but this time, her hands were empty. She had left the letters inside. Daniel barely exhaled as he pressed himself deeper into the shadows. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she carefully, deliberately, turned the key in the lock before slipping it back into her pocket. She smoothed down the front of her robe, squared her shoulders, and walked away, completely unaware that her son had been watching. Daniel didn't move until she was gone. Then slowly, he exhaled. He waited until the house fell into silence. It was late, later than late. Sylvia was asleep. Now was his chance. He moved quietly. Years of growing up in this house making it second nature to step lightly, avoid the spots that creaked, keep to the walls. When he reached the door, he didn't hesitate. The lock was old, not built for someone who had spent his teenage years sneaking out of places he wasn't supposed to be. It took him all of 30 seconds. The door creaked open. Daniel stepped inside. The room was cold. Dust lined the forgotten shelves, the air stale, untouched. A small desk lamp in the corner had been left on, its light barely illuminating the room. His eyes scanned quickly. Old furniture, stacks of storage boxes, nothing that immediately stood out. Until his gaze landed on the wooden box sitting on the desk. His stomach twisted. It was small, locked, but Sylvia's handwriting was on the lid. Daniel reached out, pried it open. His breath caught. Letters. They were neatly stacked, fragile from time. The ink slightly faded. He picked up the top one, carefully unfolding it. The first line made his vision blur. Sylvia, I know you'll never let me see him, but he is my son, and he deserves to know the truth. Daniel's fingers tightened around the paper. He reached for another. I don't care about your money, about your name, about your husband. I just want to know him. Another. You can erase me, but you can't erase blood. Nathan Hale. Daniel's stomach twisted painfully. He reached deeper into the box, flipping through the stack. Dozens of letters, all from the same man, all begging to be acknowledged. Sylvia had never told him. She had let this man disappear from his life without so much as a word. Daniel's throat felt tight as he set the letters down and reached for another file in the box. This one wasn't handwritten. It was official, clinical, a DNA test. His pulse pounded as he unfolded it, his eyes scanning the words. Probability of paternity, 0%. Daniel's vision blurred. The paper trembled in his hands. He wasn't Richard Carter's son. His entire body locked up, his breath slow and shallow. For 30 years he had been raised in this house, molded into the perfect Carter heir. He had given everything, sacrificed everything to uphold the family name, and it was never his to begin with. His jaw clenched, his grip tightening around the paper until the edges crumpled. Everything, everything. His entire life had been a lie. His hands were shaking. His mother had done this. Sylvia Carter had orchestrated every second of his existence. She had controlled, manipulated, erased the truth, built an empire on a lie, and he had spent his entire life breaking himself to fit into a legacy that was never even his. Daniel forced himself to breathe. Then slowly, carefully, he folded the letter, tucked it into his pocket. His hands curled into fists. Sylvia wasn't getting away with this. Daniel shoved himself off the room, barely aware of his own movements as he stormed down the hall. His footsteps were heavy, the sound loud in the eerie stillness of the house, but he didn't care. Reaching Sylvia's room, he didn't knock, didn't hesitate. He pushed the door open hard. The hinges groaned as the heavy wooden door swung inward, crashing against the wall. Sylvia looked up, startled. She was sitting in her velvet chair by the fireplace, wrapped in an expensive silk robe, a glass of whiskey balanced delicately in her hand. The firelight flickered against her carefully composed expression. For a brief second, she looked simply confused, but then she saw his face. The shift was immediate. Her fingers tightened around the glass, her lips parting slightly. Daniel? There was something unfamiliar in her voice. Not control, not manipulation. Something close to fear, but Daniel wasn't stopping. He didn't speak, didn't waste time. He strode toward her and slammed a stack of letters onto her desk. The impact echoed through the room. Sylvia flinched. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. The letters sat between them, a physical manifestation of every lie she had ever told. Daniel's breath was heavy, his chest rising and falling in sharp, controlled movements. His fingers still curled into fists. Tell me the truth, right now. Sylvia blinked, her face carefully neutral, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, a calculation. She reached for her glass and took a slow sip before speaking. Darling, what are you talking about? Daniel's fists slammed onto the desk, cutting her off. The sound made her jump, his jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. Nathan Hale. Sylvia's breath hitched. There it was, a crack. For the first time in his life, Daniel saw his mother lose control. It was brief, a flicker of panic, a slight widening of her eyes, a tightening of her jaw, but it was there, and now he knew. Daniel took a slow, deliberate step closer, his voice dropping lower, sharper. "You stole my entire life from me," he said, his tone eerily steady. "You made me believe I was Richard Carter's son. You made me fight for a legacy that was never mine." His voice tightened, his breath sharp. "Why, Mother?" Sylvia exhaled shakily, her fingers gripping the edge of the desk for just a second, before she forced herself to let go. She smoothed a hand over her robe, inhaled through her nose, and when she finally spoke, her voice had changed. Gone was the sharp edge, the cool, calculated control. Now it was soft, motherly. "Daniel, sweetheart, you don't understand." Daniel let out a sharp breath, a laugh, but not a real one. A short, humorless sound, low in his throat. "Oh, I understand perfectly." His words sliced through the air like a blade. Sylvia swallowed, stepping forward, her hands lifting slightly, as if reaching for him, the way she always did when he was a boy, when she wanted to smooth over a mistake, when she wanted to remind him that she was his mother, that she loved him. She tried to touch his face. Daniel jerked back, like her touch might burn him. "Don't touch me." Her fingers curled slightly, trembling in midair before she let them fall. Then, barely above a whisper, her voice cracked. "I did this for you." Daniel inhaled sharply through his nose, his eyes flashing with fury. "No," he said. "You did this for yourself." The tension between them was suffocating. Sylvia was scrambling. Daniel was furious. And then, a deep voice, cutting through the tension like ice. "What the hell is going on?" Daniel didn't have to turn to know who it was. Richard Carter stood in the doorway. He was still in his silk robe, looking like he had just woken up, but his face was unreadable. Sylvia went stiff. But Daniel? He didn't hesitate. Without a word, he picked up the DNA test from the desk, turned, and shoved it into Richard's hands. "Read it." Richard's gaze flickered between him and Sylvia, his frown deepening. Still, he unfolded the paper. The room was silent, except for the soft rustle of paper as his eyes scanned the words. Then, his face changed. Richard's fingers tightened around the paper. "This is a joke." Daniel's voice was rough, cold. "It's not." The silence stretched between them. Then slowly, Richard looked at Sylvia. His voice was lower now, even colder than before. "Tell me this is a mistake." Sylvia didn't speak, didn't move. Sylvia had never looked small before. A woman who controlled every room she walked into, who never let the cracks show. But now she just stood there, gripping the edge of the desk like it was the only thing holding her upright. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her lips pressed together, her nostrils flaring as she sucked in a sharp breath, and then, her mask shattered. "Fine." Her voice cracked, sharp and raw. "Yes." She threw up her hands, shaking her head, her breath coming fast and uneven. "But what does it matter?" The air in the room shifted. "You were never a real father to him anyway." Silence. The words hung there, heavy and poisonous. Daniel's chest rose and fell rapidly, his entire body rigid. But Richard didn't move. He just stared at her. No anger, no immediate explosion, just stillness. Then, he took a step forward. His voice was low, quiet, but dangerous. "You made me raise another man's son for 30 years? Sylvia lifted her chin, her breathing uneven. She wasn't breaking completely. Not yet, no. She was still reaching for power. "You were never a real husband to me," she spat. The words landed sharp and deliberate. Daniel exhaled, shaking his head. He didn't know what he had expected. Maybe an apology, maybe some desperate attempt at pretending she had done this out of love. But no, even now she couldn't help herself. Richard inhaled slowly, ran a hand down his jaw, as if he were just now processing the depth of what she had done. Finally, he straightened his robe, squared his shoulders, and turned to Daniel. "This doesn't have to ruin everything," he said, his voice calm, detached. Daniel let out a slow, humorless breath. Of course, that was Richard's first thought. Not the betrayal, not the fact that his entire life had been rewritten in an instant. No, his concern was about protecting the Carter name. "You can bury this truth," Richard continued, his gaze sharp, unreadable. "Stay a Carter. The world doesn't need to know." Daniel scoffed, shaking his head. He should have known. "Bury it?" His voice was laced with disbelief. "Like you buried everything else?" Richard's jaw clenched. He took a slow step closer, his voice lowering. "Think carefully," he warned. "If you leave this house, you leave it all behind. The money, the legacy, you will be nothing." Daniel barely blinked. Nothing? He had already lost everything. His sense of self, the belief that he had belonged here. His entire identity had been stripped away in one night. What the hell did he have left to lose? A sharp breath from the other side of the room. "Sylvia." She turned to him, eyes wide, desperate. "You wouldn't do that," she whispered. Daniel turned to her slowly, and for the first time he saw her clearly, not as the mother who had shaped him, who had molded him into a man who spent his entire life trying to be worthy of the Carter name. No. Now he saw her as a woman who had lied, manipulated, and robbed him of a life that had never been hers to control. He met Richard's gaze and smiled. "I was never a Carter to begin with." Then without another word, he turned and walked toward the door. But just before stepping out, he stopped. One last glance, one last goodbye. His eyes locked onto Sylvia. "You," he said, his voice quiet, final, "are not my mother." Sylvia's breath caught, her lips parting slightly, but Daniel didn't wait to see her reaction. He was already gone. Daniel Carter ceased to exist. The rain poured relentlessly, the kind of storm that made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Water soaked through Daniel's clothes, cold and biting, but he barely felt it. The Whitmore estate loomed in front of him, a place he had once thought would become his home, a place he had walked away from, and now, the only place he had left to go. His hands clenched into fists at his sides as he walked up the steps, water dripping from his hair, his breath uneven. His heart was hammering harder than it had during the confrontation with his mother, because this was the real battle. He raised his hand, knocked twice. A long pause. Then the door swung open. Thomas Whitmore stood there, his expression cold, unreadable. The moment their eyes met, Daniel knew exactly what was coming. "You lost the right to see her." Daniel swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. He had expected this. Hell, he would have been shocked if Thomas had let him in without a fight, but he wasn't leaving. Not this time. "I lost everything to be here." Thomas didn't move. "That's your problem." Daniel exhaled slowly, gripping the wet fabric of his sleeves. "You don't understand." "No." Thomas's voice was sharp. "You don't understand." Daniel flinched. "You humiliated my daughter," Thomas continued, his voice rough, furious. "You let her stand there while the whole world turned against her. You stood there and let them rip her apart." Daniel had no defense, because Thomas was right, but he couldn't walk away. Not now. Before he could say anything else, another voice cut through the rain. "Let him talk, Emily." Daniel's breath caught as she stepped into view, standing just behind her father. Even now, even after everything, she was still the most breathtaking thing he had ever seen. Her arms were crossed, her face unreadable, but her eyes were guarded. Thomas turned to her. "Emily, you don't have to." "I know," she said. Then after a moment she met Daniel's gaze. "You really gave it all up?" Daniel exhaled. "Everything." His voice didn't shake. He didn't hesitate. He needed her to believe it. He swallowed, stepping forward, just enough so she could see the truth in his eyes. "And I'll spend the rest of my life proving I deserve you." Emily stared at him for a long time. Then she moved, slow, deliberate. She reached into the pocket of her sweater and pulled out a white envelope. Daniel's stomach tightened. She held it up between them, her fingers gripping the edges. "I took a DNA test, Daniel." His breath caught. His pulse hammered in his ears as he looked at the envelope, the weight of those words sinking in. "It proves the baby is yours." His hands shook as he reached for it, but Emily didn't hand it over. She just held it there, watching him, waiting for something. He wasn't sure what. His throat felt tight. "You didn't have to." "I did." Her voice was soft but firm. "I needed to know." Daniel's eyes flicked up to hers, desperate to understand. Emily inhaled slowly, her grip tightening slightly on the paper. "Not just for the baby, not just for you, for me." Silence. Then finally she spoke the words that really mattered. "I just needed to know if I could trust you again." Daniel felt the words like a punch to the chest. Trust. That was what he had shattered the day of the wedding. That was what Sylvia had taken from them. Not just love, not just their future, but the faith Emily had in him. He swallowed hard. "Emily," she didn't let him finish. She stepped aside, just slightly, just enough for him to pass through the door. "Come inside." Daniel exhaled sharply. It wasn't an embrace. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a start. Months later, the world was quiet. The hospital room was dim, filled with golden morning light filtering through the curtains. The kind of stillness that only came after something profound, something life-changing. Emily was sitting up in the bed, her arms wrapped around a tiny bundle, her fingers brushing against soft, delicate skin. Their son. Daniel sat beside her, his hands resting lightly on the edge of the blanket, staring at the tiny face beneath it, like he was afraid to blink, like he was afraid this moment might disappear. Emily watched him carefully, taking in the way his breathing had slowed, the way his expression had shifted into something raw, vulnerable, something she had never seen before. She looked down at the baby, then back at Daniel, and then she whispered the words that mattered most. "The first man in my life who will never doubt me." Daniel inhaled sharply. His eyes lifted to hers, and something in his expression cracked wide open. He leaned in, pressing his forehead against hers. His voice was rough, hoarse. "I swear I never will." And this time, he meant it.